is a rather unpleasant urban legend that if you take a frog and place him in boiling water, he'll leap out. But that if you take a frog and put him in cold water and slowly turn up the heat, the frog will cook to death without ever trying to escape. This is often used as a metaphor to illustrate the slippery slope argument. The idea that once you start off on a path, a series of small steps can often lead to great extremes, especially if the steps are small enough to go unnoticed. There's some historical evidence that this can be used to great effect in brainwashing. There's an interesting example of this described in Pulitzer Prize-winning historian John Toland's book, In Mortal Kombat, Korea 1950 to 1953. In summary, US POWs were treated well by their captors, but asked questions along the lines of, how can it be that all communists are bad if we're treating you well? Do you think we're bad people? And over time, the responses went from thinking of their captors as the enemy through to empathising with their reasons for fighting to defend their way of life. And in some cases, this reached the point where some of the POWs eventually refused repatriation to the US and chose to go and live in communist China instead. The slippery slope, thin end of the wedge, give them an inch argument is often used in a very lazy way, usually as a straw man, to discredit opposing positions. And this means that as a logical device, it's often discounted as flawed when claiming that one thing inevitably leads to another. But I think that in some cases it does have its merits. Although I don't think that the steps always have to be small. I believe there's a critical threshold that, once breached, leads inevitably to freefall, a tipping point, the point at which you're pretty much committed and backing off is difficult, if not impossible. If you look at various religions around the world, many of them have one striking feature in common. They have a multitude of rules, prohibitions, and supposedly true, but fantastic sounding stories, all of which seem insane to non-believers, be they atheists or even people of another faith. In fact, it's not all that uncommon for Christians to mock other mythology whilst defending their own scriptures' tales of angels and talking snakes and global floods and disobedient women being transformed into seasoning. Most religions seem to be driven by a myriad of rules and stories that, if somebody actually came up with them today and used them to build a new religion from scratch, they'd be regarded as some kind of oddball cult. And in spite of this, people in their billions believe these outrageous tales, and they obey bizarre and arbitrary rules, considering anybody who breaks them to be immoral. The only way that I can explain rational people behaving in this way is through suspension of disbelief. And that is how I suspect religion gets its hold in people's minds. That is the key step on the slippery slope, the point of no return. I don't believe that most religions have really that much to do with God or spirituality, but are primarily about control. Certainly, if you look at the Abrahamic religions, it seems to be true of them. When I look at the rules that have to be followed, what's forbidden in some of the stories, even modern ones like Joseph Smith's tall tale of angels and revelation, I sometimes wonder if religion isn't some kind of cosmic test, that all these daft rules and fairy tales are there just to see how far they can push it before someone goes, whoa, this is crazy. Tales of men being swallowed by giant fish and living to tell of it, virgin births, crucified corpses rising from the dead. There doesn't seem to be any kind of shortage of them. Rules about what you can and can't eat, Jews and Muslims not being able to eat pork, Catholics not being able to eat meat on a Friday for centuries, but then no one batting an eyelid when suddenly it's okay because of a decree from authority. Rules about strange underwear that Mormons have to put on. Strange rules about chopping off male body parts. The other day I was sent a link to a site showing the rules that Jehovah's Witnesses have to follow, and it is pretty extensive. Did you know that they're forbidden to buy Girl Scout cookies? They're forbidden to celebrate any religious holidays like Christmas or Easter, or their birthdays or birthday of anybody else. They're forbidden to run for or to hold office. They're forbidden to vote in any political campaign. Forbidden to serve on a jury. Forbidden to own or wear a cross. Forbidden to have a tattoo. Forbidden to use pet foods made with blood or blood products. They're forbidden to use any tobacco products. They're forbidden to play chess. And as you go through them, you can spot the rules that are more sinister in their level of control. They're forbidden to have friends who are not Jehovah's Witnesses. They're forbidden to marry a non-Jehovah's Witness. They're forbidden to read any anti-Jehovah's Witness material. Forbidden to interpret the Bible without Watchtower literature to explain it. They're forbidden to attend the funeral of an ex-Jehovah's Witness. They must read and study the Watchtower literature regularly. Women must submit to the authority of Watchtower elders, which is a bit of a surprise, really, an Abrahamic religion that devalues women. All of this is geared towards controlling every detail of a person's life and those around them. And of course it's forbidden to question the authority of the church. If they witness another Jehovah's Witness breaking the rules, then they have to report that to the elders so that person can be interrogated. They must appear before a judicial committee themselves if they're caught breaking any of the Watchtower rules. And apparently there are secret files that are kept on members that record all of these meetings, and then they're archived in New York and never destroyed. Witnesses are discouraged from attending college. In times of crisis, they're strongly discouraged from consulting with family counsellors or mental health professionals who are not Jehovah's Witnesses. If they have a non-witness spouse, then their first loyalty is to the elders over their spouse. And that's just a selection of these things. I'd say for my part that it's a pity that none of their rules covers forbidding them to knock on your door at 8:30 on a Saturday morning. But I suppose there wasn't really that much room left for additional legislation when they were covering the big ticket items like Girl Scout cookies. And it's not just the witnesses. Other religions have strange stuff in there as well. Some stuff that's ridiculous and quite revolting. We've got Catholics who believe that when they take wine and wafer in communion, there is some mystical transformation that takes place and converts these into the actual flesh and blood of their Jewish zombie prophet. That if they douse themselves with water that's had some magic word said over it, it'll protect them and bring them closer to their God. Now, on the face of it, these bizarre and nonsensical rituals are small things. The belief in a virgin birth, or that some crucified first-century rabble-rouser can come back from the dead, doesn't seem to hurt anybody directly here in the 21st century. But I'd argue against that let-them-be approach by saying that any belief that requires faith alone is harmful. Belief that goes against reason and common sense, that requires suspension of disbelief solely on the word of authority, is, in fact, very dangerous. It provides a means of turning off that voice, the one we talked about, that makes you say, whoa, enough, this is insane. Ignoring the small contradictions and inconsistencies expands to the point where it allows millions of people to revere a man who is described in their own Holy Scripture as willing to kill his son simply because that's what the voices in his head were telling him to do. It doesn't just blur the line between right and wrong, it obliterates it completely by removing the need and perhaps even the ability to question whether something is right or wrong. Because religion requires that you have to stop questioning the small stuff, that leads directly to not questioning the big stuff, to not questioning anything at all to do with your religion. You have to have faith. So we have aeroplanes flown into city buildings. We have people strapping explosives to themselves and detonating themselves in crowded public areas like transport systems and marketplaces. We have mass suicides, parents allowing their children to die rather than permitting them to have readily available medical treatment. We have women being stoned to death for being a victim of rape. We have people murdering doctors who work in abortion clinics. And history is littered with witch burnings and crusades. And all of this is not because these people don't know right from wrong. It's because they've stopped asking whether what they're doing is right or wrong. They think that what they're doing is right without ever stopping to question it. So if religion is a test to see at what point people say, enough, this is wrong, then the answer is horrifying clear to me. There isn't one. Once people stop questioning the small inconsistencies and contradictions, once they accept that they must believe what they're told on the basis of authority, it ultimately has to lead to them not questioning anything to do with their religion. And that alone demonstrates quite effectively just how dangerous these superstitions are, and why, like cruelly boiling a live amphibian to death, this kind of behaviour has no place in a civilised society.